In what became known as the most shocking confrontation in Cedar Valley's history, a peaceful organic farmer turned an attempted extortion into a legend that would change an entire community. A decorated Navy SEAL who had found peace tending to his crops was forced back into action when the notorious Steel Wolves motorcycle gang chose the wrong target. But what started as a violent encounter would transform into something nobody expected. A story of redemption that would reshape the lives of both predator and prey. This is the incredible true story of how one man's patience transformed a gang of ruthless bikers into protectors of the very community they once terrorized. Let us know in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and if you find this story inspiring, hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned because tomorrow's story is going to blow you away. The early morning sun hadn't yet crested over the distant hills as James Harrison worked his organic farm fields. At 42, his muscular frame moved with quiet efficiency through the rows of vegetables, checking irrigation lines with the same precision he once used to check tactical gear. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had taught him to start early, stay alert, and check every detail. "Morning, James," Margaret Wilson's familiar voice carried across the field. The elderly woman made her way toward him, carrying her signature basket of fresh muffins and thermoses of coffee. "Thought you might need breakfast. You've been out here since before dawn again." James straightened up, wiping his hands on his worn jeans. "Margaret, you're spoiling me. Sarah would have loved these muffins." His voice softened at the mention of his late wife. "Well, someone has to look after you. Your mother would haunt me if I didn't." Margaret set the basket down on a nearby work table. "Besides, you're the only one who helps me with my tomato plants. This year's sauce competition is mine." As they shared breakfast, the distant rumble of motorcycles echoed through the valley. Margaret's face tightened with concern. "They're back. Third time this week." James remained calm, methodically finishing his coffee. "The Steel Wolves are getting bolder. Sheriff Matthews says they've hit 3 farms in the next county." "They broke Bob Turner's arm when he refused to pay their protection money," Margaret whispered. "His feed store's been in his family for generations. Now he's talking about selling." The motorcycles grew louder. James helped Margaret gather her things. "You should head home. I'll handle this." "James Harrison, don't you dare let those thugs intimidate you," Margaret warned, but hurried toward her car. She'd barely pulled away when 5 motorcycles roared up the dirt road to Harrison Farm. Their leader, known only as Snake Davidson, cut an imposing figure in black leather decorated with steel wolf emblems. His scarred face twisted into what passed for a smile as he surveyed the fertile fields. "Nice setup you got here, farmer," Snake called out, killing his engine. "Shame if something happened to it." His 4 companions spread out, their boots crushing seedlings as they walked. James stood quietly, hands relaxed at his sides. To anyone who knew what to look for, his stance would have revealed years of combat training. But to these bikers, he was just another poor farmer about to learn a harsh lesson. $5,000 a month keeps your pretty farm safe," Snake continued, pulling on thick gloves. "Otherwise," he kicked over a tray of tomato seedlings, "accidents happen." "Those were Margaret's competition tomatoes," James said softly. His voice carried no threat, but something in his tone made 2 of the bikers exchange uncertain glances. Snake didn't notice. "Oh, the old lady's plants. Maybe we should pay her a visit too. Bet she'd bake us some nice muffins." James's eyes hardened slightly. Last chance to leave peacefully. After that, things get complicated. The bikers erupted in laughter. Snake pulled out a heavy chain, wrapping it around his fist. "Boys, teach Farmer John here what happens when people don't respect the Steel Wolves." A biker called Bulldog moved first, swinging a lead pipe at James's head. But James wasn't there anymore. With movements honed through countless combat operations, he sidestepped the attack and disarmed Bulldog with a precise strike to the wrist. The pipe hadn't hit the ground before Bulldog joined it, gasping for air. "What the hell?" Tank, the largest biker, charged forward. James moved like water, redirecting Tank's momentum into a nearby water trough. The big man surfaced, sputtering and shocked, Snake's face contorted with rage. "Ghost wrench! Kill him!" The two remaining bikers pulled knives, circling James cautiously. They attacked together, expecting to overwhelm him. Instead, their coordination worked against them as James used one's momentum to knock down the other. Snake stared in disbelief as his crew lay groaning on the ground. "You're dead, farmer!" He swung his chain in a deadly arc. James caught it with one hand, his years of training evident in the fluid motion. That's what the Taliban said too. He yanked the chain, pulling Snake off balance. They were wrong. The fight ended quickly after that. When Sheriff Matthews arrived 5 minutes later, he found 5 members of the notorious Steel Wolves zip-tied with their own bike chains, sitting in James's tomato field. "Jesus, Harrison," the sheriff sighed. "Couldn't leave the excitement back overseas." James was already replanting Margaret's tomato seedlings. "They threatened Margaret, Dave. You know I couldn't let that stand." But this was just the beginning. No one could have predicted how this single confrontation would spiral into a story of redemption, healing, and unexpected brotherhood. The peaceful farmer who had tried so hard to leave violence behind was about to embark on his most important mission yet, one that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone in Cedar Valley. The stage was set for an incredible journey that would prove sometimes the greatest victories come, not from defeating an enemy, but from turning them into allies. And it all started with a simple farmer who just wanted to grow his tomatoes in peace. Word of the confrontation at Harrison Farm spread through Cedar Valley like wildfire. By sunset, Sheriff Matthews' phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from concerned citizens and reporters trying to verify the rumors. 5 members of the Steel Wolves, a gang that had terrorized 3 counties, taken down by a single farmer. At the county jail, Snake Davidson nursed his bruised ego along with his injuries. His lieutenant, Mike Razor Thompson, listened through the cell phone as Snake spat out orders. "Get everyone together. I want that farm burned to the ground by morning." "Boss, maybe we should think this through," Razor suggested, watching the other Steel Wolves gather at their warehouse hideout. "Something's not adding up about this farmer." "Are you questioning me?" Snake's voice turned dangerous. "That man humiliated the Steel Wolves. Nobody does that and lives to tell about it." Meanwhile, at Harrison Farm, Deputy Sarah Chen took photographs of the scene while James cleaned up the mess from the fight. "Mr. Harrison, you need to accept protection. When the rest of the Steel Wolves find out about this—" "I appreciate the concern, Deputy," James interrupted gently, "but I can handle myself." He continued replanting Margaret's damaged tomato seedlings with military precision. Sarah wasn't giving up. "Sir, there are at least 20 more gang members out there. They've never let an insult go unanswered. Last month they burned down the Miller farm just for refusing to pay protection money. Then maybe it's time someone stood up to them." James's voice remained calm, but Sarah noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, checking sight lines and potential approach routes. This was not the behavior of a simple farmer. Back at the station, Sarah shared her observations with Sheriff Matthews. "Dave, something's off about Harrison. The way he moves, the way he took down 5 armed men. He's had serious training." Matthews sighed, looking at a folder marked "Classified" on his desk. "Sarah, some things are better left alone. Just know that James Harrison is the least of our worries." That evening, Margaret refused to leave the farm despite James's protests. She sat at his kitchen table, stubbornly rolling out dough for her famous pies. "Those thugs threaten my tomatoes. Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat properly." A truck pulled up outside. Dr. Alice Rivera, the local veterinarian and James's late wife's best friend, hurried in. "James, I just heard. Are you okay?" Her eyes quickly scanned him for injuries. "I'm fine, Alice. Just some garden maintenance today." James managed a small smile. "Garden maintenance. The whole town's talking about how you single-handedly took down half the Steel Wolves." She lowered her voice. "They're saying Snake Davidson is out for blood." "Let him come," James said quietly, but something in his tone made both women exchange worried glances. At the community center, Pastor Dan Mitchell was dealing with the aftermath in his own way. The Steel Wolves had been terrorizing his congregation for months, demanding protection money from church fundraisers. He called an emergency meeting with local business owners. "We can't let James face this alone," Frank Cooper from the hardware store argued. "The Wolves will come back with everything they've got." "But what can we do?" Bob Turner asked, his broken arm in a sling. "They're killers. We're just farmers and shopkeepers." Pastor Dan looked thoughtful. "Maybe that's been our problem all along. We've been acting alone. It's time we stood together." As night fell, the Steel Wolves gathered in force at their warehouse. Over 30 bikes lined up as Snake laid out his plan for revenge. But Razor couldn't shake his unease. He'd served in the army, and something about the way Harrison had fought seemed familiar. "Check this out," Ghost said, showing Razor his phone. He'd been digging into Harrison's background. "Guy moved here 2 years ago, right after his wife died. Bought the farm from his uncle. But before that, nothing. It's like he didn't exist." Razor's military instincts screamed warnings. "Snake, we need to know more about this farmer before we move against him." "We know all we need to know," Snake snarled. "He's dead. Tonight we show Cedar Valley what happens when you disrespect the Steel Wolves." Young Tommy Wilson, Margaret's grandson, watched from his hiding spot behind the warehouse. He'd followed the bikers, hoping to gather information to help James. His heart raced as he heard their plans, but as he turned to slip away, a twig snapped under his foot. "What was that?" Tank's voice boomed. "Check the perimeter." Tommy ran, his feet pounding on the gravel. Behind him, motorcycles roared to life. The boy knew these roads well, but the bikes were faster. Headlights illuminated his path as the gang closed in. Just when Tommy thought he was done for, a familiar pickup truck appeared from a side road. The passenger door flew open. "Get in," James commanded. Tommy dove into the truck as James executed a perfect defensive driving maneuver, throwing up a cloud of dust that blinded their pursuers. In the rearview mirror, Tommy watched the frustrated bikers pull up short. "How did you know?" Tommy gasped, his heart still racing. "Margaret called, said you were acting suspicious at dinner." James's voice was calm, but his eyes never stopped checking the mirrors. "That was a brave thing you did, Tommy. Stupid, but brave." "They're coming tonight," Tommy blurted out. "All of them. They're going to burn down the farm." James nodded, unsurprised. "I know. That's why I need you to help me get everyone to safety." The truck turned toward town, where lights were starting to come on as word spread of the impending confrontation. Cedar Valley was about to experience a night that would change everything. The question wasn't whether the Steel Wolves would attack, but whether one former Navy SEAL could protect an entire community from their vengeance. And unknown to everyone, this night would set in motion events that would either tear Cedar Valley apart or forge it into something stronger than anyone could imagine. The real battle wasn't just about protecting a farm, it was about saving the soul of a community. The old church basement hummed with nervous energy as James addressed the gathered townspeople. Sheriff Matthews stood by the door, his deputies strategically positioned around the building. Outside, the distant rumble of motorcycles grew steadily louder. "Everyone stays here until it's over," James instructed, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made people listen. "Sheriff Matthews and Deputy Chen will keep you safe." "But it's your farm they're coming to burn," Frank Cooper protested. "Everything you've worked for." "Buildings can be rebuilt," James replied. "Lives can't." His eyes met Margaret's determined gaze. "No arguments, Margaret. You too." "The hell with that," Margaret declared, standing up. "Sarah would never forgive me if I let you face this alone. Besides, I've got fresh pies in your oven." A ghost of a smile crossed James's face. "The pies can wait." "Those aren't for you," Margaret said firmly. "After a good fight, even the worst people get hungry. Sometimes the best way to end a war is with a warm slice of pie." Dr. Alice Rivera stepped forward. "I'm setting up a medical station here. Just try not to give me too much work, okay?" As James headed for the door, Tommy Wilson rushed up. "Let me help. I know where they stashed their extra fuel tanks. I saw them when I was—" "You've helped enough." James cut him off, but his voice was kind. "Your job now is to protect your grandmother. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is stay put." Outside, Sheriff Matthews pulled James aside. "You sure about this? I can have state police here in an hour." "An hour's too long," James replied, checking his watch. "And this needs to end tonight, Dave. These people have lived in fear long enough." The sheriff nodded reluctantly. "You know, when you moved back here, I thought you were done with all this." "So did I." James looked up at the darkening sky. "Sometimes we don't choose our battles. They choose us." Back at Harrison Farm, James worked quickly and methodically. To any observer, his preparations might have seemed strange. He wasn't boarding up windows or setting up barricades. Instead, he was strategically positioning farm equipment, adjusting irrigation systems, and setting up work lights in seemingly random patterns. Meanwhile, the Steel Wolves gathered at their staging area. Snake paced in front of his assembled force, 35 riders strong, the largest gathering of the gang in years. "This ends tonight," Snake's voice carried over the rumbling engines. "Harrison humiliated us, made us look weak. After we're done with his farm, no one will dare stand against the Steel Wolves again." But Razor noticed something odd. Their most violent members were cheering, but some of the veterans in the group looked uncomfortable. He recognized the look. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough. It was the face of men who'd seen enough violence in their lives. "Ghost Tank, you take the east approach," Snake ordered. "Bulldog's team hits from the west. I want that place surrounded." "Boss," Razor spoke up. "Something's not right. Harrison's had hours to clear out, but my sources say he's still there. Alone." "Good," Snake grinned. "Makes it easier." "No," Razor insisted, his military instincts screaming. "It makes it suspicious. No normal farmer stays to face 35 armed men alone." Snake's hand shot out, grabbing Razor's collar. "You questioning me again?" "I'm trying to keep us alive," Razor shot back. "I served, Snake. The way Harrison moved, the way he set us up, he's not just some farmer." "Don't care if he's goddamn Superman," Snake snarled. "Tonight, he's a dead man." The bikers roared off into the darkness, splitting into their assigned groups. But Razor held back, watching through his binoculars. Something about the farm's layout had changed. The work lights created strange shadows, and the equipment wasn't where it had been that morning. At the church, Tommy couldn't sit still. "We should be helping him." Margaret put a hand on his shoulder. "Watch and learn, child. Sometimes the quietest men are the most dangerous." Deputy Chen frowned at her radio. "Sheriff, we're getting reports of explosions at the Steel Wolves warehouse." "That's impossible," Matthews replied. "All their guys are headed to Harrison's farm." "Not all of them," Tommy grinned. "I might have mentioned where they keep their fuel to a certain farmer." Back at the farm, James stood in his darkened barn, listening to the approaching motorcycles. His hands moved automatically, checking equipment that had nothing to do with farming. The muscle memory from his SEAL days had never left him. The first wave of bikers hit the irrigation pipes he'd repositioned, their bikes slipping in the mud. The work lights, strategically placed, destroyed their night vision while leaving long shadows where James could move unseen. "Spread out," Snake's voice carried over the confusion. "Find him." But James was already moving, a shadow among shadows. One by one, bikers found themselves disarmed and disabled by an opponent they couldn't see. Years of special operations experience merged with intimate knowledge of the farm's layout. "He's picking us apart," someone shouted. Razor, watching from the road, saw the pattern. "Son of a... He's using tactical sweep formations. This guy's military." Snake, enraged, grabbed a gas can. "Burn it! Burn it all!" But when he tried to splash fuel on the barn, he found the can filled with water. All their fuel reserves had been destroyed in the warehouse explosion. "Looking for this?" James's voice came from the darkness, holding up a fuel cap. Never leave your supply lines unprotected. Basic tactical error. Snake spun around, firing his pistol blindly. The shot went wide and suddenly James was there, disarming him with practiced ease. Snake found himself face down in the mud, his arm locked behind him. You know what your biggest mistake was? James asked quietly. Not the protection racket, not threatening my farm. It was threatening Margaret. She makes pies for the VA hospital every week. Some of your own men probably had them. The fight was over in less than 20 minutes. When Sheriff Matthews arrived, he found 23 bikers zip-tied and sitting quietly in the barn. Some were nursing injuries, but none were seriously hurt. Another dozen had fled into the night. But it was what happened next that would truly change Cedar Valley forever. Inside the warmly lit barn, the captured steel wolves sat in an odd silence. The fight drained from them. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with motor oil and hay. James moved among them, not as a captor, but as something else entirely, checking their injuries, offering water, and most surprisingly asking questions. You served in the 75th Regiment? James asked one of the younger members, noticing his faded tattoo. 2 tours in Afghanistan, the biker muttered, then looked up sharply. How did you... The way you moved during the fight. Rangers have a distinctive style. James handed him a cup of coffee. Kandahar? Helmand Province. Similar conversations sparked around the barn as James identified more veterans among the captured bikers. 8 in total, including Razor, who watched the exchanges with growing understanding. You're not just some farmer, Razor finally said. The way you set this up, the fields as a kill zone, the lights for disorientation, the supply line disruption, that's SEAL tactics. The barn fell silent. Snake, still secured, but now sitting on a hay bale, jerked his head up. What? James considered the group for a long moment. SEAL Team 6, 20 years, retired as Master Chief. Bullshit, Snake spat, but his voice wavered. Several of the veteran members straightened instinctively, military bearing returning automatically. Check his move against Tank, Razor continued. That was a SEAL takedown technique, and the way he used the terrain. Man, we never stood a chance. Margaret chose that moment to enter the barn, ignoring James's exasperated look. She carried a large basket covered with a checkered cloth. Well, if you boys are done trying to burn down my friend's farm, I brought pie. The absurdity of the moment, a grandmother offering pie to captured gang members, broke the tension. A few bikers actually laughed. Margaret, James started. Hush now, she cut him off. Sarah always said you'd forget to eat if someone didn't remind you. She began distributing paper plates. Besides, my grandson Tommy tells me some of these boys are veterans. No veteran goes hungry on my watch. The mention of Tommy made several bikers shift uncomfortably, remembering chasing the kid earlier. But Margaret acted as if she was serving pie at a church social. Mrs. Wilson, one of the veteran bikers spoke up. We're sorry about earlier. With your grandson, eating my pie is a good start toward making amends, Margaret replied firmly. Now who wants coffee? Sheriff Matthews arrived to find an almost surreal scene. Captured bikers eating pie while James and Razor discussed shared experiences in Afghanistan. Dave, James called him over. I think we might have a solution that doesn't involve filling up your jail. I'm listening. James gestured to the veterans among the group. These men aren't criminals at heart. They're warriors who lost their way, found the wrong kind of brotherhood. Razor nodded slowly. The Steel Wolves. It was supposed to be about having each other's backs. Somewhere along the way, under Snake's leadership, it became about intimidation and fear. That true? Matthews asked the group. One by one, the veteran bikers nodded. Even some of the non-veterans looked thoughtful, pie plates empty in their hands. Here's my proposal, James continued. Those who want to change, who want to find a better path, I'm offering you a chance. The farm needs help. More importantly, I know other vets who need help, people who understand what you've been through." Snake sneered. "You're crazy if you think—" "Shut up, Snake." Razor cut him off. "For once in your life, just shut up." He turned to James. "What exactly are you offering?" "A program. Part work, part therapy. The VA's been after me to start one anyway. You help rebuild what you tried to destroy tonight. Learn some farming skills, get some counseling, and maybe find a better way to use your brotherhood." Deputy Chen, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Sheriff, we could make it part of a rehabilitation program. Alternative sentencing. Those who complete it get clean records." Matthews nodded. "Those who don't—" "I'm in," said the young ranger immediately. Others began nodding. "You're all weak." Snake tried to stand but couldn't with his hands secured. "The Steel Wolves aren't some therapy group." "No," Razor agreed. "We're supposed to be brothers, and we've forgotten what that means." He faced James. "If you're serious about this offer, I know some other vets who could use it too. Guys who haven't fallen in with us yet, but they're close." Dr. Rivera arrived to check on the injured bikers. "James," she said quietly, "Sarah would be proud of this. It's exactly what she would have done." The mention of his late wife made James pause. Sarah had always believed in second chances. It's why she'd supported his dream of turning the farm into a place of healing. As the night wore on, plans began taking shape. Sheriff Matthews made calls to the DA's office. Dr. Rivera offered to coordinate with VA counselors. Margaret simply kept pouring coffee and serving pie, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. By dawn, 13 members of the Steel Wolves, including all 8 veterans, had accepted James's offer. Snake and his most hardcore followers would face charges, but the majority of the gang was taking a different path. "You know," Razor said as the sun rose, "we'll need a new name. Can't keep Steel Wolves if we're going to change." "How about the Garden Warriors?" Tommy suggested, having snuck back to the farm despite his grandmother's protests. The former bikers groaned, but there were smiles behind their objections. Something had shifted during that long night in the barn. A new kind of brotherhood was taking root, nourished by Margaret's pie and James's quiet understanding. None of them could have predicted how this strange night would transform not just their lives, but the entire community of Cedar Valley. The war that everyone expected had instead become something far more powerful, a chance for redemption. 1 week after the confrontation at Harrison Farm, the morning quiet was broken by the rumble of motorcycles. But this time, they came not to destroy, but to rebuild. Razor led a group of 12 former Steel Wolves up the gravel drive, their bikes gleaming in the early sun. "Still can't believe we're doing this," muttered Tank, looking uncomfortable without his usual leather vest. "Better than jail," Ghost reminded him, eyeing the burned remains of their old warehouse. Besides, after what happened to Snake, they'd all heard how Snake and his loyal followers had tried to ambush James at the local diner 2 days after the barn incident. The fight lasted exactly 23 seconds. Snake ended up with a broken arm and a 5-year sentence, while James calmly finished his coffee. James stood waiting by the barn, his posture relaxed but alert. "Glad you made it. Hope you all had breakfast. We've got a long day ahead." "Margaret sent us with these." Razor held up a basket of muffins. "Said something about growing boys needing proper food." "Of course she did." James smiled slightly. "First thing we need to do is clear the damaged fields. Those bikes of yours tore up quite a bit of soil." The work was hard, but none of the men complained. They'd expected harsh treatment, militant discipline. Instead, they found something unexpected: respect. James worked alongside them, teaching rather than commanding. "See these tomato plants?" James demonstrated proper replanting techniques. "The roots tell you everything. Just like in combat, you need to read the signs, understand what's beneath the surface." By mid-morning, Dr. Alice Rivera arrived to set up the first counseling session in the converted barn office. "Who's first?" she asked, clipboard ready. The men exchanged nervous glances until Razor stepped forward. Guess that's me. Lead by example, right? As Razor disappeared into the office, Deputy Chen pulled up in her patrol car. She'd been assigned as liaison for the rehabilitation program. How's it going? Better than expected, James replied, watching Tank carefully showing Tommy how to check soil pH levels. They're warriors at heart, just needed a new mission. The local news crews showed up around noon, drawn by the unusual sight of former gang members working a farm. James kept them at a distance, but allowed a few photos. These men deserve privacy while they rebuild their lives, he told the reporters firmly. Pastor Dan arrived with lunch, courtesy of his congregation. Church council voted unanimously to support the program, he announced. We're converting the old youth center into a dormitory for veterans who need housing. The transformation wasn't just physical. As the men worked the land, stories began to emerge. Ghost had been a combat medic before PTSD drove him to the gang. Tank lost his family to divorce after 3 tours left him unable to readjust to civilian life. Each had sought brotherhood in the Steel Wolves, finding temporary relief in violence and intimidation. It's strange, Razor commented during a water break. In the gang, we thought we were free, but we were just building another prison. That afternoon, Frank Cooper from the hardware store arrived with donated tools. Whole town's talking about what you're doing here, he told James. Bob Turner wants to know if any of your guys know mechanics. His garage needs help. More community members began stopping by. Maria Gonzalez, whose farm had once been targeted by the Steel Wolves, brought homemade tamales. My father always said hungry men can't think straight, she declared, setting up an impromptu feast in the barn. The former bikers were bewildered by the acceptance. They'd expected hatred, fear, not homemade food and job offers. Why are they doing this? Ghost asked James quietly. Because that's what community means, James replied. When I came back from my last tour, this town helped me heal. Now it's your turn. As evening approached, Margaret arrived with more pies, accompanied by Helen Matthews, the sheriff's wife. Ladies Auxiliary wants to help, Helen announced. We're organizing a fundraiser for the veteran housing program. Never thought I'd see the day, Sheriff Matthews commented, watching his wife chat with former gang members about her famous peach cobbler. You sure about all this, James? They're not bad men, Dave. Just lost their way. James paused, remembering his own struggles after leaving the SEALs. Sometimes the hardest part of war is coming home. The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. Snake's trial starts next week. His hardcore followers are looking at serious time. But the DA's agreed to alternative sentencing for anyone who completes your program. As the sun set, the men prepared to leave. They'd accomplished more in one day than any of them expected. The damaged fields were cleared, new seedlings planted, and the first counseling sessions completed. Same time tomorrow? Razor asked, wiping sweat from his face. Be here at dawn, James confirmed. And Razor, tell the others. The ones still on the fence. Doors open if they want help. That night, after everyone had gone, James sat on his porch with Margaret, sharing the last piece of pie. Sarah would be so proud, Margaret said softly. This was her dream too, wasn't it? Making the farm a place of healing. James nodded, looking out over the fields where former enemies had spent the day learning to create rather than destroy. She always said everyone deserves a second chance. Well, Margaret stood, gathering her empty pie tins. I'd say you're off to a good start. Those boys remind me of you when you first came home. Lost, angry, needing purpose. They're good men, James said. Just need someone to remind them of that. As Margaret drove away, James checked his phone. 3 more former Steel Wolves had texted, asking to join the program, and Bob Turner had sent a message about hiring 2 of them at his garage. The seeds of change had been planted. Now they just needed time to grow. 2 weeks into the rehabilitation program, trouble arrived in the form of 20 motorcycles roaring into Cedar Valley. The Death Riders, a rival gang from the next state, had caught wind of the Steel Wolves' apparent weakness. James was teaching a group of veterans about irrigation systems when Razor rode up fast to the farm. We've got problems. Big ones. Death Riders? James asked calmly, though his eyes had already started scanning the horizon. They're at Bob's garage right now, threatening Tank and Ghost. Word got out about our change in management. James wiped his hands on a cloth. Get everyone back to the farm, now. At Bob Turner's garage, Tank and Ghost were facing down the Death Riders' leader, a mountain of a man known as Crusher. Both former Steel Wolves had been working legitimate jobs there for a week. Look at you two, Crusher sneered. Playing mechanic, drawing honest paychecks. Steel Wolves turned into steel puppies. Leave it alone, Crusher, Tank warned. We're done with that life. Nobody's done until we say they're done. Crusher knocked over a tool cart. Snake might be in jail, but you still owe us protection payments from his deals. Bob Turner stepped out of his office, his formerly broken arm still in a light brace. This is my property. Get out before I call the sheriff. Crusher laughed. Call whoever you want, old man. By the time they get here, they're already here, came James's quiet voice from behind them. The Death Riders turned to find James standing there, accompanied by Sheriff Matthews and Deputy Chen. Behind them, trucks and cars were pulling up, carrying more former Steel Wolves and townspeople. This isn't your business, farmer, Crusher growled. Actually, it is. James stepped forward. These men work for Bob. Bob's a friend. That makes it my business. Crusher looked around at his gang. 20 of us, one of you. I like those odds. You might want to check your math, Sheriff Matthews commented as more vehicles arrived. Former Steel Wolves who'd joined the rehabilitation program were pulling up, along with dozens of townspeople. Even Margaret was there, armed with her wooden spoon. This is what you left the Steel Wolves for? Crusher taunted Tank and Ghost. Playing farmer with some local hero? No, Tank replied, standing straighter. We left because we found something better than fear. We found purpose. And community, Ghost added, moving to stand beside James. Crusher's face darkened. You're dead. All of you. He reached inside his jacket. What happened next became another Cedar Valley legend. Before Crusher could draw his weapon, James moved with the liquid speed that had made him legendary in the SEALs. The giant biker found himself disarmed and face down on the concrete. Now, James said conversationally, maintaining his hold on Crusher, we're going to have a civilized discussion about territory and respect. The Death Riders reached for weapons but froze as Sheriff Matthews' deputies emerged from strategic positions, weapons ready. More importantly, they found themselves surrounded by determined townspeople and reformed bikers standing shoulder to shoulder. See, here's the thing, James continued, his voice carrying to everyone. Cedar Valley isn't just some territory to be carved up. These people aren't marks for your protection racket. They're my friends. My family. Our family, Razor corrected, stepping forward. The other former Steel Wolves nodded. So you have two choices, James went on. Leave now and spread the word. Cedar Valley is off limits. Or, he applied slightly more pressure, making Crusher gasp. We can continue this discussion at the sheriff's station. Your call. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then one of the Death Riders gunned his bike and took off. Others followed quickly. Within minutes, only Crusher remained, still pinned by James. Okay, Crusher wheezed. We're gone. Cedar Valley's yours. No, James corrected, helping him up but maintaining a firm grip. Cedar Valley belongs to its people. Remember that. As the Death Riders retreated, Bob Turner approached Tank and Ghost. Well, boys, that was an exciting lunch break. Now about that transmission you were rebuilding. The casual return to normalcy broke the tension. People began dispersing, though many headed to Margaret's house. She'd announced an impromptu celebration dinner. That evening, the farm's barn was packed. Former enemies sat together sharing Margaret's cooking, while Dr. Rivera led a group therapy session. The Death Riders' appearance had shaken some of the veterans, bringing up old traumas. I almost went for a weapon, Ghost admitted during the session. It was pure instinct. But you didn't, James reminded him. You chose a different path. That's what matters. Sheriff Matthews, enjoying Margaret's pie, pulled James aside. Word's spreading about your program. Got calls from 3 other counties asking how to set up something similar. It's not my program, James replied. It belongs to everyone here. These men, this town, they're doing the real work. Looking around the barn, James saw Tank teaching Tommy about motorcycle maintenance while Margaret supervised. Razor was discussing plans for a veteran-run security company with Bob Turner. Pastor Dan was organizing a community garden project with Maria Gonzalez. You know, Deputy Chen commented, joining them. When you took down Snake and the Steel Wolves, I thought that was impressive. But this, she gestured at the scene before them. This is the real victory. Late that night, after everyone had gone home, James sat on his porch steps. The confrontation with the Death Riders had proven something important. The changes in these men were real. When tested, they'd chosen their new community over their old ways. Razor appeared out of the darkness, taking a seat beside him. Hell of a day. Could have gone badly, James acknowledged, but it didn't. Because you showed us there's something worth fighting for besides ourselves. Razor paused. The others wanted me to ask you something. We've been talking about a new name for our group. Valley Guardians, Razor announced at the next morning's gathering. The former Steel Wolves had gathered in Harrison Farms' barn, which now served as their unofficial headquarters. That's what we want to call ourselves. James watched from the corner, seeing the pride in their faces as they discussed their new identity. The men had removed their old Steel Wolves patches, replacing them with simple black vests. No flashy logos, Tank explained. No threatening symbols, just the words Valley Guardians and a wheat stalk, because this valley gave us roots when we needed them most. Deputy Chen, present for the announcement, nodded approvingly. It's official then. I'll register it as a legitimate organization with the state. The transformation went beyond just names. Bob Turner had hired 4 more veterans at his garage. Maria Gonzalez was teaching 2 others about organic farming methods. Even Frank Cooper had taken on a few at his hardware store. Got a situation, James. Sheriff Matthews arrived, looking concerned. Remember those 3 counties that asked about copying your program? They're sending people. Today. Lots of people. How many? 5 sheriff's departments, dozen social workers, VA representatives, and... Matthews hesitated. About 30 gang members wanting to reform. Word spread about what you did with the Death Riders. James rubbed his temples. We barely have enough space for our current program. That's not all, Matthews continued. Media's caught wind too. National networks this time. As if on cue, they heard vehicles approaching. Looking out the barn door, they saw a convoy of cars and trucks heading toward the farm. News vans brought up the rear, their satellite dishes visible from a distance. Well, Margaret appeared with her basket of muffins. Good thing I baked extra. The next few hours were chaos. Law enforcement officials from neighboring counties wanted to know about security protocols. Social workers asked about counseling methods. VA reps discussed funding options. And the media wanted to film everything. But it was the arrival of the other gang members that proved most interesting. They came from different groups. Some rivals, some allies of the former Steel Wolves. All had heard about Cedar Valley's transformation and wanted the same chance. It's like you said, Razor told James as they watched the new arrivals. Warriors who lost their way, just needed someone to show them another path. James gathered everyone in the main field. The crowd had swollen to over 100 people. Officials, media, curious townspeople, and former gang members all mixed together. Let me be clear, James addressed them. This isn't a quick fix or an easy way out of legal troubles. What we're doing here is hard work. It's about rebuilding, not just farms or businesses, but lives. He gestured to the Valley Guardians. These men chose to change. They work every day to earn back trust. They face their traumas in therapy. They learn new skills. They help their community. If you're not ready for that commitment, there's the road. Nobody left. Right then, James continued. First thing, everyone with a camera needs to leave. These men deserve privacy while they rebuild their lives. The media protested, but Sheriff Matthews and his deputies firmly escorted them to the property line. One reporter tried arguing about public interest. The public's interest, James told him, is in successful rehabilitation, not reality TV. These men need space to heal. Once the cameras were gone, the real work began. Dr. Rivera and other counselors set up intake interviews. Pastor Dan coordinated with churches from other counties about housing. Bob Turner and Frank Cooper talked about job training programs. The Valley Guardians took charge of the new arrivals, showing them around, explaining the program. Their own experiences made them perfect mentors. "See that field?" Tank told a group. "Week ago it was dirt. Now it's growing tomatoes. That's what this place does. Takes broken things and makes them grow again." Margaret, Helen Matthews, and other town leaders organized a massive welcome dinner. The sight of former gang members sitting down with law enforcement and townspeople to share a meal was powerful. "Never thought I'd see something like this," Deputy Chen admitted, watching former rivals working together to set up tables. As the sun set, James found a quiet moment with Razor. "You realize what this means? We're going to need more space, more resources." Razor smiled. "Already handled. The Valley Guardians took a vote. We're donating all our seized assets, money, properties, everything, to expand the program." "That's significant money," James observed. "Blood money," Razor corrected. "Time it served something good." Later that night, after most had left, the core group gathered in the barn. They had flip charts full of plans, housing developments, training programs, counseling schedules. "It's growing beyond just us," Ghost said, looking at the plans. "That's the point," James replied. "Every person we help becomes someone who can help others." Tommy, who'd been quiet all day, spoke up. "You know what this means? The Valley Guardians could be everywhere, helping people in other towns like you helped us." The men exchanged looks. The idea of their redemption spreading, helping others find their way back. It was powerful. "One step at a time," James cautioned. "First, we need to make sure we do right by these new arrivals." Margaret brought out one last pie. "Well, better get started then. Hope you boys are ready for some long days ahead." As they shared the pie, plans were made, duties assigned. The Valley Guardians were no longer just a local group of reformed bikers. They were becoming something bigger, a model for change, a beacon of hope for others lost in darkness. And it all started because one former SEAL believed in second chances. 3 months after the program's expansion, Snake Davidson's trial was drawing to a close. The courthouse was packed as James took the stand, his testimony crucial to the prosecution's case. "Mr. Harrison," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court about your interactions with the defendant and the Steel Wolves." Snake glared from the defendant's table, but James remained composed. "They came to my farm demanding protection money. When I refused, they threatened violence." "And you, a simple farmer, managed to subdue multiple armed attackers?" James met Snake's eyes. "I'm a retired Navy SEAL Master Chief. There was nothing simple about it." The revelation caused a stir in the courtroom. Snake's face went pale as 20 years of classified operations were briefly summarized for the court. "And after subduing them," the prosecutor continued, "you offered rehabilitation instead of prosecution to those willing to change?" "Yes, because I recognized what they really were, lost warriors who needed a new mission." Snake's lawyer tried challenging James's testimony, but footage from multiple phones showed exactly what happened that night. When asked about the Death Riders incident, James simply stated, "They chose to leave peacefully." Back at Harrison Farm, the expansion was in full swing. The Valley Guardians had purchased adjacent properties using their surrendered assets. New dormitories housed 50 veterans in recovery. Training facilities and counseling centers operated daily. "Problems at the North Field," Razor reported as James returned from court. "New guys got into a fight. Old gang rivalries dying hard." James found Tank and Ghost already handling the situation, separating two groups of former rivals. "You want to fight?" Tank demanded. "Fine, channel it right." He pointed to the boxing ring they'd set up. In there, with gloves, under supervision. Or you're out of the program. The men looked sheepish. One spoke up. They killed my friend 2 years ago. And how many of their friends did you kill? Ghost asked quietly. We've all got blood on our hands. Question is, are you here to add more or to wash it off? The tension broke. Slowly, the group separated, heading to different work assignments. Good handling, James told Tank and Ghost. You're getting better at this. Learned from the best, Ghost replied. Speaking of learning, got word from the VA. They're officially recognizing our program. Want to use it as a model nationwide. Inside the main barn, now converted into an administrative center, Dr. Rivera was coordinating with counselors from 3 counties. The trauma-informed approach is working, she reported. Combining therapy with physical work gives them purpose while they heal. Pastor Dan arrived with news from his latest community outreach. 4 more churches want to sponsor rehabilitation programs, and the business associations offering more job placements. The Valley Guardians had become integral to the community. They provided security for local events, helped elderly residents with home repairs, and maintained an emergency response team for natural disasters. Remember when we used to terrorize places like this? Razor mused during lunch. Now we're protecting them. Deputy Chen, bringing updates from the sheriff's office, shared some surprising statistics. Crime rates down 60% across 3 counties. Other gangs either leaving or asking about rehabilitation. You're changing the whole region. But success brought new challenges. That evening, James called an emergency meeting. Representatives from law enforcement, the VA, local government, and the Valley Guardians gathered in the barn. We've got a situation, James began. Word's spreading too fast. We're getting more requests than we can handle, and some people are trying to copy our program without understanding it. Sheriff Matthews nodded. Got reports of 3 rehabilitation programs that are just scams, using our name to steal money from desperate families. Plus, Razor added, other gangs are pretending to reform just to gather intelligence. Had to turn away 10 guys last week who were obviously plants. We need structure, Dr. Rivera suggested. Official certification, training for program leaders, quality control. The discussion lasted hours. Plans were made to formalize the program, create training protocols, and establish verification systems. The Valley Guardians would become trainers, teaching other communities how to properly rehabilitate former gang members. It's not just about giving people second chances anymore, James explained. It's about doing it right. One failure could destroy everything we've built. Tommy, who'd become the program's unofficial photographer, showed them his latest pictures. Former enemies working together, veterans healing, communities transforming. You know what I see? Margaret asked, looking at the photos. I see hope. These men aren't just changing themselves. They're showing others it's possible. Late that night, after everyone left, James walked his fields. The once quiet farm had become a beacon of transformation. But with Snake's sentencing approaching and copycats threatening their work, he knew bigger challenges lay ahead. Razor joined him on his walk. Snake's lawyer approached me, wanted me to testify that you used excessive force, offered a deal. And? Told him to shove it. We've got a new code now. Razor looked over the illuminated buildings where former gang members were finding new lives. Everything we built here, it's bigger than Snake. Bigger than any of us. James nodded, understanding. The small seed of change they'd planted had grown into something remarkable. Now they had to protect it, nurture it, and help it spread properly. Sarah would have loved this, James said quietly. She always said the farm could heal people. Never knew how right she was. Snake Davidson's sentencing hearing changed everything. The courtroom fell silent as he stood for his final statement, but instead of showing remorse, his eyes blazed with hatred. You think this is over? Snake snarled, turning to face James. The Death Riders were just the beginning. I've got friends in darker places. They're coming for your little fairy tale farm. The judge sentenced him to 15 years, but the damage was done. His words sparked a chain of events that would test everything the Valley Guardians had built. 2 days later, James found Razor waiting in his office before dawn. "We've got confirmation. Snake wasn't bluffing. The Demon Kings are mobilizing." James's expression hardened. The Demon Kings were no ordinary gang. They were an organized crime syndicate with connections across multiple states. "How many?" "At least 100 riders. But that's not the worst part." Razor handed over a file. "They're targeting our other rehabilitation centers too, all at once." The Valley Guardians had successfully established 5 satellite programs in neighboring counties. Each center housed dozens of veterans trying to rebuild their lives. Sheriff Matthews called an emergency meeting. Law enforcement representatives from 6 counties crowded into the barn alongside Valley Guardian leaders. "Intel suggests coordinated attacks," Matthews reported. "They want to destroy everything you've built. Show everyone that rehabilitation is a fool's dream." "Let them come," Tank growled, but James raised a hand. "This isn't about fighting," James said. "It's about protecting what we've built. These men trusted us with their second chances. We won't let them down." Dr. Rivera spoke up. "We have 87 veterans in active rehabilitation across all centers. Many are still dealing with PTSD. A violent confrontation could undo months of therapy. Not to mention the community support we'd lose if this turns into a war," Deputy Chen added. James studied the map they'd spread across the table, his SEAL training kicking in. "We need to evacuate the satellite centers. Bring everyone here." "That's over 200 people counting staff and families," Pastor Dan noted. "Where will we put them?" "The church camp," Margaret suggested from the doorway. Everyone turned. No one had heard her arrive. "It's empty this season. Plenty of cabins, good security setup." "My construction crews can fortify it," Frank Cooper offered. "Got lumber and materials ready to go." The Valley Guardians moved with military precision. Within hours, convoys of trucks were discreetly relocating rehabilitation program members. Local businesses provided supplies. Community members opened their homes. James coordinated from the farm, which had become their command center. He watched as former enemies worked together, helping families evacuate, securing properties, establishing communication networks. "Never thought I'd see breakers and outlaws working together," Ghost commented, referring to 2 formerly rival gangs whose members had gone through rehabilitation. "They're not breakers or outlaws anymore," Razor replied. "They're Valley Guardians now." By nightfall, the evacuation was complete. The church camp had been transformed into a fortified sanctuary. Local law enforcement established perimeters. The Valley Guardians set up patrol routes. But James knew this was just the beginning. "They'll try to draw us out," he told the leadership team. "Make us look like the aggressors. Turn the community against us." "Already starting," Deputy Chen reported, checking her phone. "Social media's lighting up with rumors. They're painting us as a rival gang, saying we're the ones causing trouble. Time to show them who we really are," James decided. The next morning, the Valley Guardians launched Operation Community Shield. Teams of reformed veterans, wearing their new uniforms, began providing free security for local businesses. Others helped elderly residents with home repairs. Medical teams offered free checkups in underserved areas. Local media covered their efforts. Testimonials poured in from families whose lives had been changed by the rehabilitation program. Churches and civic groups publicly endorsed their work. "See what you did?" Margaret told James, watching the news coverage. "You didn't just teach them to fight differently, you taught them to live differently." But the Demon Kings weren't finished. That evening, 3 suspicious fires broke out across town. As first responders rushed to handle them, dark figures were spotted near the school. The Valley Guardians were ready. Teams of reformed veterans coordinating with police intercepted the intruders before they could plant explosive devices. The would-be bombers were caught on camera, proving the Demon Kings were targeting innocent civilians. "They're trying to terrorize the community," Sheriff Matthews said during their nightly briefing. "Make people too afraid to support us. Then we'll show them what real strength looks like," James replied. That night, as thunder rolled across the valley, James stood watch at the farm. The calm before the storm felt familiar. He'd experienced it many times during his SEAL missions. Razor joined him on patrol. You know, when I was with the Steel Wolves, I thought strength meant making people fear you. Now I understand it's about making them trust you. Lightning illuminated the valley, and with it, the hundreds of headlights approaching from multiple directions. The Demon Kings had arrived. The storm was about to break. The hundreds of approaching headlights cast an eerie glow across Cedar Valley. James watched from his tactical position as the Demon Kings surrounded the area. Their numbers were even greater than intelligence suggested, at least 200 bikes. All units, check in. James spoke quietly into his radio. Church camp secure, Tank reported. All rehabilitation members safe. Town perimeter covered, Ghost confirmed. Police and Valley Guardians in position. Community center locked down, Deputy Chen added. Emergency services standing by. The Demon King's leader, a man known only as the Judge, pulled up to the farm's main entrance. Unlike Snake's brash aggression, the Judge carried himself with cold calculation. His leather cut bore no patches except a simple scale of justice, twisted and broken. Harrison! The Judge's voice boomed across the property. Come face your judgment! James stepped into the light, alone. His casual stance betrayed none of the combat readiness beneath. Kind of dramatic, don't you think? You've undermined everything we stand for, the Judge snarled, turning warriors into farmers, making predators into prey. No, James replied calmly. I helped lost men find their way home. Big difference. The Judge signaled, and his riders revved their engines threateningly. Last chance. Shut down your programs. Send our people back, or we burn everything. Your people? James raised an eyebrow. They're not property. They're men who chose a better path. Then you choose war. Actually, James smiled slightly. I choose this. Suddenly, lights blazed on all around the valley. The Demon Kings found themselves surrounded, not by police or armed forces, but by the community itself. Hundreds of townspeople stood shoulder to shoulder with the Valley Guardians. Farmers on tractors blocked escape routes. Church buses created barriers. Construction workers manned impromptu barricades. See, while you were gathering your army, James continued, we were reminding these men what real brotherhood looks like. From within the Demon King's ranks, dozens of riders suddenly pulled away, removing their gang colors to reveal Valley Guardian uniforms underneath. The Judge's eyes widened as he realized the truth. They'd infiltrated his own organization with rehabilitated members. Your own people chose us, Razor emerged from the shadows, because we offer something you never could, redemption. The Judge reached for a weapon, but James moved with lightning speed, disarming him effortlessly. Not happening, not here. More Demon Kings began removing their colors. They'd seen the success stories, heard about second chances. Some had family members in the rehabilitation program. The fearsome army was dissolving before their eyes. This is what strength really looks like, James addressed the remaining riders. Not fear, not violence, but community, choice, change. Margaret's voice carried from the porch, where she stood with her ever-present basket. And pie. Change always goes better with pie. The tension broke. Several Demon Kings actually laughed. They'd heard about Margaret's legendary pies through the rehabilitation grapevine. You have a choice, James continued. Stay and fight against an entire community ready to defend its own. Or, he gestured to the Valley Guardians. Join us. Find a better way. The Judge, his power visibly crumbling, made one last desperate move. Anyone who turns coat is dead. We'll hunt you down. Like you hunted me? A new voice spoke. From behind the townspeople emerged Snake's former Lieutenant Hawk, who'd disappeared months ago. I've been undercover in your organization for weeks. Got enough evidence to take down your entire operation. Sheriff Matthews stepped forward, holding up a flash drive. Including your connections to 3 state crime syndicates. FBI's very interested. The judge's face went ashen. More riders began removing their colors. Face it, James said quietly. Your way is finished. The only question is whether you're smart enough to change with the times. What happened next would be talked about for years in Cedar Valley. As dawn broke over the horizon, nearly 150 former Demon Kings members stood in line at the farm, turning in their colors, signing up for rehabilitation. The judge and his few loyal followers were arrested without further incident, their criminal empire collapsing as evidence was revealed. Tommy, recording everything on his phone, captured the moment perfectly. Former enemies sharing Margaret's pie, townspeople helping newcomers fill out registration forms, Valley Guardians welcoming their former rivals as brothers. This is crazy, Ghost said, watching the scene. A year ago, we were terrorizing towns like this. Now we're defending them. Not defending, James corrected. Transforming them, and ourselves in the process. Dr. Rivera, organizing initial counseling assessments, smiled. You know what this means? We're going to need a bigger farm. The morning sun rose over a changed valley. The night that was meant to destroy their work had instead validated it in the most powerful way possible. The Valley Guardians weren't just a rehabilitation program anymore. They were a movement. And it all started because one former SEAL believed that even the hardest hearts could change. 6 months after the night the Demon Kings fell, Harrison Farm had transformed beyond recognition. New buildings dotted the expanded property, including dormitories, training centers, and counseling facilities. The original barn had become a community center, its walls covered with before and after photos of successful rehabilitations. Hard to believe this all started with some tomato plants, Margaret mused, arranging fresh flowers in the community center. Today was graduation day, the first official ceremony for completed rehabilitation program members. James adjusted his tie, feeling uncomfortable in formal wear. Sarah always said gardens have a way of growing beyond their borders. The ceremony was drawing national attention. News crews set up outside, still kept at a respectful distance, while government officials and VA representatives filled the front rows. But the real story was in the faces of the graduates. Razor, now the program's head of security, approached James with a tablet. Final count. 127 graduating today, including 40 former Demon Kings. Employment status? James asked. 100% placement, Razor grinned. Bob Turner's opened 3 new garages. Frank Cooper's hardware chain is expanding. Maria Gonzalez is teaching organic farming to 12 of them. Even got some starting their own businesses. The graduation ceremony began with Pastor Dan offering a blessing. Dr. Rivera presented psychological evaluations showing remarkable recovery rates. Sheriff Matthews shared crime statistics that had other law enforcement officials furiously taking notes. But the most powerful moment came when the graduates themselves spoke. Tank, now clean-cut in a business suit, took the podium. Year ago, I was terrorizing people like you. Thought strength meant making others fear you. Now I know. Real strength is helping others overcome their fears. Ghost followed, his medical training restored and expanded. We were lost, trying to find brotherhood in violence. Instead, we found family in healing. One by one, they shared their stories. Former enemies who now worked side by side. Veterans who'd found purpose beyond their trauma. Men who'd chosen to transform their lives. James watched from the side, letting them have their moment. Deputy Chen joined him, holding a thick folder. FBI's final report on the Demon Kings investigation, she said quietly. 43 convictions, 11 crime syndicates dismantled. Your undercover graduates did amazing work. They just needed the right mission, James replied. The ceremony reached its peak as Margaret took the stage. The graduates stood straighter. They'd all learned to respect the woman with the wooden spoon. When James started this program, people said it wouldn't work, Margaret began. Said you can't change human nature. Well, they were wrong. You don't change human nature, you remind people of their humanity. She gestured to the graduates. I've fed every one of you. Watched you change from scared, angry men into community leaders. And let me tell you something, my pies didn't do that. You did. by choosing every day to be better than you were yesterday. The applause was thunderous. Then something unexpected happened. The graduates stood as one and faced the audience. "We have an announcement," Razor said. "The Valley Guardians are expanding. We've been approached by veterans groups in 12 states. They want us to help set up similar programs. With the VA's backing," Ghost added, "we're establishing training centers nationwide, teaching other communities how to help their lost warriors find their way home." James felt a hand on his arm. Tommy, now working as the program's official documentarian, pointed to the back of the room. "Look who showed up." Snake Davidson stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards. His prison-approved visit had been kept secret from most. His face showed a mix of confusion and something else, longing. James walked back to him. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Had to see it for myself," Snake said quietly. "Heard rumors in prison. Didn't believe them." He watched as his former gang members celebrated their new lives. "How? How did you do it?" "We didn't." James nodded toward the graduates. "They did. They chose to change. Is it—" Snake hesitated. "Is it too late? For someone like me?" James studied him for a long moment. "You know our rules. Admit your wrongs. Make amends. Do the work. Even after everything I did? Second chances don't expire, Snake. But they have to be earned." For the first time since they'd met, Snake's tough exterior cracked. A tear rolled down his face as he watched his former enemies embracing their new lives. The graduation ceremony concluded with a tradition Margaret had started, each graduate receiving a small tomato plant. "Life's like growing tomatoes," she told them. "Takes patience, care, and getting your hands dirty. But if you do it right, you create something good for everyone." As the sun set over Harrison Farm, the graduates celebrated with their families. Children played where once there had been violence. Former rivals shared meals and plans for the future. James walked his fields alone, remembering that first confrontation that started everything. He heard Sarah's voice in his mind. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest seeds. A new chapter was beginning. The Valley Guardians were no longer just a local success story. They were becoming a national movement. And it all started because one former SEAL believed in the power of second chances. 1 year after the first graduation, Cedar Valley hosted the National Conference for Veteran Rehabilitation and Community Integration. The event brought together law enforcement, veterans organizations, and reformed gang members from across the country. James stood at the podium in the newly built conference center, which just months ago had been an empty field. "Welcome to Harrison Farm," he began, or as our graduates call it, Second Chance Valley. The audience represented an unlikely mix, police chiefs sitting next to reformed gang members, VA officials alongside small-town farmers, all united by a common goal, replicating the Valley Guardians' success. "Today we have Valley Guardian chapters in 28 states," Razor reported, now wearing a suit as the organization's national director. "Over 2,000 graduates, 89% employment rate, 72% reduction in recidivism." The statistics were impressive, but the real story lay in the individual transformations. Tank now owned the largest veteran-operated automotive chain in 3 states. Ghost had established a medical training program for former combat medics. Even Snake Davidson, still serving his sentence, had started a prison-based mentoring program. Deputy Chen, recently promoted to captain, shared law enforcement perspectives. "We're seeing something unprecedented, former gang territories transforming into community support zones. The Valley Guardians aren't just preventing crime, they're making it obsolete." Dr. Rivera presented their therapeutic model. "The key is comprehensive care, addressing trauma while building purpose. These men don't just leave their old lives, they build new ones." But the most powerful moment came during the community panel. Margaret, still wielding her famous wooden spoon despite national recognition, spoke about transformation. "You want to know our secret?" she asked the audience. Look around. Every building here was constructed by program members. Every crop planted by reformed hands. We didn't just give them rules to follow. We gave them a community to build. The conference featured success stories that seemed impossible a year ago. Former rivals now ran successful businesses together. Veterans who'd once terrorized communities now led their emergency response teams. The Valley Guardians had become synonymous with positive change. During a break, James found Tommy in the media room, now a professional photographer documenting the program's growth. "Got something to show you," Tommy said, pulling up a series of photos. The images told their story: the first confrontation with the Steel Wolves, the night the Death Riders came, the fall of the Demon Kings. But more importantly, they showed the quiet moments: veterans working fields, learning trades, healing old wounds. "Publishing companies are interested," Tommy explained. "Want to make a book, show others how to build programs like ours." Pastor Dan, overseeing the conference's community outreach panel, shared another development. Churches nationwide are opening their doors, creating support networks, the models spreading beyond just veteran rehabilitation. Frank Cooper and Bob Turner presented their business integration program. "We've got companies fighting to hire our graduates," Frank announced. "They're proving to be some of the most reliable workers we've ever had." Maria Gonzalez demonstrated their agricultural training program, now partnered with state universities. "From warriors to farmers," she said proudly. "They're feeding the communities they once threatened." But it was the evening session that truly showed how far they'd come. The Valley Guardians unveiled their new national initiative, Operation Hometown Shield. "We're not just rehabilitating individuals anymore," Razor explained. "We're teaching communities how to heal themselves. Every graduate becomes a mentor. Every success story seeds another." James watched from the back as his small idea continued to grow. Deputy Chen joined him, holding a letter. "Just got this from the Justice Department," she said. "They want to make the Valley Guardians model the national standard for gang intervention and veteran rehabilitation." "It's not about us," James replied. "It's about giving others the tools to help themselves." The conference concluded with a tradition: Margaret's pie served to all attendees. The sight of police chiefs and reformed gang members sharing dessert and swapping stories embodied everything they'd accomplished. Late that night, after the crowds had gone, the core group gathered in the old barn where it all started. Photos of their first confrontation hung beside images of recent graduations. "Remember when we thought this was just about stopping some local troublemakers?" Ghost mused. "Sometimes the smallest seeds grow the biggest trees," Margaret quoted, making them smile. James looked around at these people who'd become family. They'd started with a simple idea, that everyone deserves a second chance, and created something that was changing the nation. As they shared one last piece of pie, plans were already forming for the next phase. The Valley Guardians were no longer just a program. They were becoming a movement. And it all started because one former SEAL refused to give up on the humanity in others. On a crisp autumn morning, 2 years after the first confrontation at Harrison Farm, James received an unexpected letter. The return address was from the state penitentiary where Snake Davidson was serving his sentence. "You need to see this," James told Razor, handing him the letter. Snake's words were different from his usual anger-filled rants. He wrote about watching the Valley Guardian's success on prison TV, about the changes in his former gang members, about his own slow journey toward understanding. "I'm eligible for early release," Snake had written, "based on my work with the prison rehabilitation program, the one I started after seeing what you built. I know I don't deserve another chance, but—" James looked at Razor. "What do you think?" 2 years ago, I'd have said hell no," Razor replied. "But now—" He gestured out the window where former Demon Kings members were teaching new recruits farming techniques. "People change. We did." That afternoon, James visited Snake in prison. The former gang leader had lost his swagger, replaced by something quieter, more thoughtful. "Why'd you do it?" Snake asked. "That night at the farm. You could have just taken us down, had us locked up. Instead, you offered help. Because someone once did the same for me, James replied. After my last tour, I was lost, angry. Sarah showed me another way. Then when she died, this community helped me find purpose again. Meanwhile, back at the farm, a new crisis was developing. Deputy Chen, now Captain Chen, arrived with troubling news. Got word from FBI, she reported to Razor. Cartels trying to move into the old Steel Wolves territory. They think the Valley Guardians have made it soft. Razor gathered the senior Valley Guardians, Tank, Ghost, and others who'd been there from the beginning. They don't understand, Tank said. We're not weak. We're stronger than ever. But differently strong, Ghost added. We protect through building up, not tearing down. The Valley Guardians mobilized, but not with violence. They organized community watches, worked with local businesses to improve security, and most importantly, reached out to at-risk youth before the cartels could recruit them. Margaret, hearing about the threat, simply increased her pie production. Can't plan a proper defense on an empty stomach, she declared. The cartel sent scouts, expecting to find easy targets. Instead, they found communities united. Former enemies working together. Veterans and civilians creating something worth protecting. See that kid? Ghost pointed out a teenager to a cartel scout who'd been caught and invited to dinner. Margaret's idea, of course. 2 years ago, he was running drugs. Now he's in college. That's what we do here. We give people better options. The cartel's attempt to establish territory quietly failed. Not through violence, but because they couldn't compete with hope. Back at the prison, Snake's release hearing was underway. James testified, explaining the Valley Guardians rehabilitation program. Other graduates spoke about their transformations. Mr. Davidson has shown remarkable progress, the prison warden testified. His mentoring program has reduced prison violence by 40%. Snake addressed the board last. I was wrong, he said simply. About everything. I thought strength meant making people fear you. These men showed me real strength is helping people overcome their fears. The board approved his release, with conditions. Snake would enter the Valley Guardians program, under strict supervision. The man who once tried to destroy everything they built would now have to help build it. When Snake arrived at Harrison Farm, he found not hatred, but cautious acceptance. The men he once led had become leaders themselves, showing him a new way to live. First thing, Tank told him, handing him work gloves. You learn to grow tomatoes. Margaret's orders. Margaret herself appeared with her basket. About time you showed up. These boys needed someone to test my new recipes on. That evening, James walked his expanded fields. What started as one small farm had grown into a sprawling campus of hope. Dormitories housed veterans in recovery. Training centers taught new skills. Counseling offices helped heal old wounds. But more importantly, it had grown into a family. Former enemies shared meals together. Children played where once there had been violence. The past wasn't forgotten, but it no longer controlled the future. Razor joined him on his walk. Remember what you told me that first night in the barn, about warriors needing a new mission? James nodded. Well, look at us now. We've got graduates running programs in 30 states, Snake's prison programs going national. Even the cartels can't compete with what we're building. They reached the original barn, now preserved as a reminder of where it all started. Inside, photos told their story. The Steel Wolves, the Death Riders, the Demon Kings. Each conflict had only made them stronger, not through force, but through transformation. You know what Sarah would say about all this? James asked quietly. What? She'd say we're just getting started. 3 years to the day after the Steel Wolves first rode onto Harrison Farm, the Valley Guardians celebrated their biggest milestone yet. The president had signed the Veterans Rehabilitation and Community Integration Act, making their program the national standard for gang intervention and veteran support. James stood in the original barn, now a museum of transformation, looking at the wall of success stories. Snake Davidson's photo had recently been added. He'd completed the program and now ran rehabilitation services at 3 state prisons. Got a situation. Razor interrupted his thoughts. Remember those first tomato plants Margaret was so worried about? The ones the steel wolves destroyed? What about them? They're giving out the first harvest from their descendants today. 3,000 plants, grown from Margaret's original seeds, going to new rehabilitation centers nationwide. Margaret herself had turned her famous pie recipes into a job training program. Baking for Brothers now operated in 50 cities, helping veterans and former gang members start their own businesses. Never thought my pies would become part of a national rehabilitation strategy, she chuckled, teaching Snake the secret to her crust recipe. But sometimes the best healing happens around a kitchen table. The farm had evolved into something beyond anyone's imagination. The Valley Guardians Training Academy now occupied 50 acres, teaching everything from farming to business management. But more importantly, it taught transformation. Look at this. Tommy, now the program's official historian, showed James his latest project. A documentary about their journey was being used in police academies and VA centers nationwide. The footage showed their evolution. The first confrontation with the Steel Wolves. The night the Death Riders came. The fall of the Demon Kings. But it also showed the quiet victories. First jobs, family reunions, restored lives. Tank, overseeing the automotive training program, had just opened his 10th veteran-operated garage. We're not just fixing cars, he explained to a new group of trainees. We're fixing lives. Ghost's medical training initiative had partnered with major hospitals, creating career paths for former combat medics. From battlefield medicine to community healing, he said. Full circle. Bob Turner and Frank Cooper had expanded their business training program into a national network. These men aren't just employees, Frank told a Chamber of Commerce meeting. They're showing corporate America what real redemption looks like. Even the old Steel Wolves warehouse had been transformed. Now it housed the Valley Guardians Emergency Response Center, coordinating disaster relief across multiple states. Former enemies worked side by side, protecting the communities they once terrorized. Captain Chen, addressing a law enforcement conference, shared the latest statistics. 87% reduction in gang activity, 92% employment rate for graduates. But numbers don't tell the real story. Communities are healing. Pastor Dan's church network had grown to include thousands of congregations nationwide, each supporting local rehabilitation efforts. Faith without works is dead, he quoted. These men are living proof that change is possible. Dr. Rivera's trauma therapy program had become a model for veteran care. We're not just treating PTSD, she explained. We're helping warriors find new battles worth fighting. As evening approached, the farm hosted a special ceremony. The original Valley Guardians, those first Steel Wolves who chose to change, were passing leadership to the next generation. Razor, now serving as national director, addressed the gathering. 3 years ago, we thought strength meant making people fear us. James showed us real strength is helping people overcome their fears. The new leaders included graduates from every major gang they'd encountered: Steel Wolves, Death Riders, Demon Kings. Former enemies now united in a mission of transformation. James watched from the back, remembering Sarah's words about the farm's healing potential. He felt her presence strongly in moments like these, when broken lives found new purpose. Snake approached him, looking different in his business casual attire. Never thought I'd say this, but thank you for not giving up on us, even when we gave up on ourselves. Margaret appeared with her basket, right on cue. Less talking, more eating, she insisted. Can't change the world on an empty stomach. As they shared pie in the old barn where it all started, James looked at these people who'd become family. Former enemies who'd learned to trust. Lost warriors who'd found their way home. A community that had discovered its strength not in walls, but in bridges. The Valley Guardians had become more than a program. They were a living testament to the power of second chances, proving that even the hardest hearts could change when given the right soil to grow in. And it all started because one former SEAL remembered what his wife had taught him. that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating your enemies, but from helping them become allies. 5 years after the first confrontation at Harrison Farm, James stood in a field of blooming tomato plants, watching the sunrise with his morning coffee. The farm had grown into a sprawling campus of hope, but this original field remained special. It was where everything changed. "Thought I'd find you here." Margaret's voice carried across the morning dew. She wasn't carrying a basket of pie for once, but rather a letter. This came from the White House. The Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony was scheduled for next month. But that wasn't what brought the smile to James's face. It was the other letter Margaret carried, from a small town in Montana, where the latest Valley Guardians chapter had just opened. "Their first graduate class," Margaret explained. 27 former gang members, all veterans. They're growing your wife's tomatoes, too. Sarah's heritage tomato seeds, saved by Margaret after that first violent night, had become a symbol of transformation. Every new rehabilitation center started with these plants, a living reminder that growth comes from nurturing, not force. The morning calm was broken by the familiar rumble of motorcycles, but these riders wore different colors now, the Valley Guardians' emblem of a rising sun over crossed wheat stalks. Tank led the convoy, returning from an emergency response mission in tornado-hit Texas. "You should have seen it," Tank reported, his face tired but proud. Former Demon Kings working alongside Death Riders, helping rebuild homes. Even the locals couldn't believe it. The Valley Guardians had become the largest veteran-led disaster response organization in the country. Their reputation for turning former enemies into allies had made them uniquely qualified for bringing communities together in crisis. At the training center, Snake was teaching a class on conflict resolution, something that still amazed those who remembered his violent past. "Strength isn't about who can hurt who," he told his students. "It's about who can help heal." Ghost's medical program had expanded to include mental health services. "We don't just patch wounds anymore," he explained to a new group of combat medics. "We heal the invisible ones too." Razor, now advising the Department of Justice on rehabilitation programs, brought the latest numbers. Over 10,000 graduates nationwide, 83 rehabilitation centers, a 94% success rate. But the real success stories were in the details, like Tommy, who'd grown from a scared kid hiding from bikers to running the Valley Guardians youth outreach program, or the former cartel scout who'd tried to infiltrate them 3 years ago. He now coordinated their anti-trafficking initiatives. Captain Chen, recently promoted to commissioner, shared some surprising news. "Remember how we used to track gang territories? Now we track transformation zones, areas where Valley Guardian graduates are actively rebuilding communities." The old Steel Wolves warehouse, once a symbol of fear, had become the Valley Guardians' national training headquarters. The walls that once planned violence now displayed success stories. Thousands of before and after photos showing the power of second chances. As evening approached, the farm hosted its annual community dinner. Tables stretched across the fields where battles once raged. Former enemies broke bread together, sharing stories of transformation. Dr. Rivera, watching the gathering, smiled. "You know what the most powerful therapy turned out to be? This: community, belonging, purpose." Pastor Dan nodded agreement. "When we started, we thought we were just stopping violence. Turns out we were rebuilding souls." Margaret naturally had outdone herself with the pies. "Can't celebrate proper without dessert," she insisted, though her wooden spoon was now more of a ceremonial object than a weapon. James stood to address the gathering, something he rarely did. 5 years ago, on this very field, we had a choice: meet violence with violence, or try something different. We chose to believe in the power of second chances. He gestured to the transformed campus around them. But what we really built wasn't buildings or programs. We built proof. Proof that it's never too late to change. That the hardest hearts can soften when given the right soil to grow in. Snake stood up next, surprising everyone. "I was that hard heart," he admitted. "Thought I was building an empire. Instead, I was building a prison. These people showed me how to build something better: community." As the sun set over Harrison Farm, James walked the grounds one last time. Every step held memories. The spot where he'd first confronted the steel wolves. The barn where enemies became allies. The fields where lost souls found their way home. Razor joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. You know what I realized? We're not really growing tomatoes here. We're growing hope. James smiled, remembering Sarah's words from so long ago. Sometimes the smallest seeds yield the biggest harvests. The Valley Guardians had become more than an organization. They were living proof that transformation was possible, that enemies could become family, that warriors could find new battles worth fighting. And it all started because one former SEAL believed in second chances, a grandmother wielded a wooden spoon with love, and a community chose to build bridges instead of walls. The story of Harrison Farm wasn't just about stopping violence or rehabilitating veterans. It was about remembering our shared humanity and the incredible things that happen when we choose to nurture it. As night fell over the valley, the lights of the campus glowed like stars fallen to earth, each light representing a life transformed, a heart healed, a warrior who'd found their way home. The seeds of change had grown into a forest of hope, spreading far beyond Cedar Valley. And somewhere, James knew, Sarah was smiling.